much for logging into our training session explaining the updated Morrisons bolt-on standards for red tractor assured pork production. Please make sure you've got a copy of the assessor guidance notes available to use alongside the presentation. So the aim of the training is to make sure that you, as our auditors, understand the reason for the Morrisons bolt-on standards for the red tractor assured pork production, the consultation and communication process we went through with producers and lots of different stakeholders, the requirements and how to assess these standards, and how to complete the pig welfare management risk matrix. There's a bit of background information. We thought we'd go through why this bolt-on audit is important to us. So, Morrisons were fully supportive of the red tractor standards, and these standards are built on the foundations of those. And you'll have noticed from the trainer notes that we've just gone with the same sort of standards descriptions, and you'll have seen that in the standards that we've had before. However, we do sort of think that some areas of pig production would benefit by having a lot greater clarity or additional information gathered from the site to increase a bit of a governance throughout the supply chain. So as trusted assessors on the ground, we really feel that you've got the ability to help feedback what you think about our pig farmers and help us form a bit of an appreciation of our supply chain, celebrating the good and also where those suppliers may need some additional support. Throughout this whole process, we went through a big consultation exercise because it's really important that we've got lots of different feedback from people who are actually doing everything on the ground. And it's really important that the standards at the end of the day are a success and promote good practice. So we had a big consultation exercise in May, June and July and used the valuable feedback to produce this final version. So the bolt-on standard is in the process of being sent out to all producers in August and September. And the following stakeholders are also receiving communications. So Pig Veterinary Society, relevant veterinary practices, the National Pig Association, HWE Pork, Red Tractor, of course, who we've worked with throughout, pig marketing groups, as well as the certification bodies. So the bolt-on for these standards is effective and assessed from the 1st of October 2018. So a bit about the Morrisons approach. So at Morrisons, our approach is to work very much with our producer supply base to help positively support and inspire the supply chain by supporting and encouraging best practice and pork production. There's some really good things already happening in our industry, as we all know. Collectively working to improve pork supply where we can, identifying and working producers that might need some support, in addition to what we can do to help. Now, there is some additional paperwork required from these standards, but it's really more about the observation of the stock people and the pigs, as well as engagement with the producer and their staff, that's key for us. So we've sort of built something that we've called the risk-based matrix, and I'll just bring these slides up for you now before I sort of talk through them all. At the end of each of the visits, our vision that each producer will be left with the assessment matrix that you've seen at the end of the programme. So everybody have a bit of a sense of where they feel that they are as producers and where we can sort of shout out bits of success, as well as work together on areas that might need to be further improved. I mean, we do appreciate, of course, that any visit is only ever a one-off observation. However, this coupled with our own visits as well could help us understand a bit more about success and challenges on farm. So we'd like this matrix to be very much based on your judgment of the site as you go around it, but also some of the standards have a way of linking in, don't they, really? Some of them can help reveal what some of the additional sort of measures are. So as we've sort of talked through, and as you can see, we've got various different sort of bits on this risk management matrix. So whether the producer is able to sort of compare themselves against the rumour targets for the industry, how are they doing against those targets? Are they doing better than those targets, hopefully? How are their mortality rates comparing to those in the veterinary health plan? Where do you think they lie for tidiness and hygiene and biosecurity on farm? That's often a really good indicator of general practice. How about stockmanship, and how are the staff performing on the farm? How well do they understand their pigs and what they have to do? How's the farm managing overall pig health? And where does that farm stand on its management of welfare, including any vice challenges and tail biting, etc.? How adequate is the housing on the farm for the pigs, including those farrowing areas? And how successfully are the pigs interacting with the environmental enrichment that they've been provided with? There'll be more detail on the risk-based matrix later in the presentation. So the following slides provide the detail of the additional standards that are assessed as part of the bolt-on, and they're split into several sections. It'll be useful to have your guidance notes open and ready to consult these when required. Okay, so key for use. We've tried to provide as much clarity as we can about how the bolt-on audits will be assessed, and as you can see, the columns are headed in different ways. So we've got the red tractor standard, i.e. obviously what's in the current red tractor requirements, the Morrisons additional standards, which are subdivided into required now and required by 2020 to give a bit of a sense of direction and planning, the evidence requirements and whether these need to be at primary or additional sites, the auditor notes, and the type of assessment and its priority. So just as a bit more breakdown of this particular bit of the documents, as you'll have seen. So the additional standards that we talked about are breaked into what's required now. So those are things that actually do need to be assessed versus what's going to be required by 2020. So a bit of a demonstration of progression of the standards and not to be assessed with the current version. Going through to the next sort of slide here. So, for example, that a standard that doesn't need to be assessed but is just about 2020 direction is HF I.4, which is about the sours kept in farrow crates for no more than 56 days. Okay, so going through to the next sort of bit of description of these headings that we just tried to put in this time, we recognise that there's some evidence that we only need to really have on primary sites, so the main holding, but you know, there's other things that could be useful to have out at additional sites. So, for example, the emergency action plan needs to be located at the primary sites, but the out-of-hours contact numbers for Woodheads just would need to be available at additional sites. So it's just trying to break through what's actually practical and reasonable to use. They're looking through as well just for the last pieces on there and notes for auditor. So we just thought it was helpful to explain about how to assess the standard and for this to be open for everybody to look through, so it's as transparent as possible. But also the code explains how compliance is going to be demonstrated. So whether it's about paperwork or whether it's about site observation. And we put this in as a bit of a sense check, really, just to make sure it wasn't all about paperwork, but we were thinking about how this, you know, well, the site is. That's the most important thing at the end of the day, is how the pigs are and how the site's been looked after and how the staff interact with their pigs as well. And then the final column is just talking about priority levels, which is trying to give a bit of a background and some information for you about how we sort of see the priority of all these different standards that we've put in. So sometimes if it's a major non-conformance, the producer's got 28 days to correct anything and send in evidence to the certification body, which might result in a follow-up assessment from Morrisons, though not necessarily in that 28-day rectification period. It all depends on what it is, of course. It might be just a minor non-conformance, so option 2, which you've got 28 days to correct it, or equally it might just be a recommendation with no actual requirements to submit corrective action, just some advice really on the day. So just as a final bit of a checking of understanding for a couple of slides before we move on to the next section, we'll just go through. So Mr. Smith has got 3 breeding units, 1, 2 and 3, which are all run independently, and a finishing unit which is supplied by 2 of the other units. So which of the following must be available on each site? Okay, so we've got the Woodhead supplier questionnaire, the farm plan, the first aid kit, the ECA Ethical Trading Initiative base code poster, and the veterinary health plan. Okay, so those are the options. And then just going through. So for the Woodhead supply questionnaire, just one questionnaire combined for all sites and just held at the primary site is perfectly adequate. Equally, the farm plan, just one plan held at the primary site. However, things like the first aid kit, it'd be good to have that on all sites. Obviously, you never know where accidents can happen. The Ethical Trading Initiative base code poster, well, the main poster at the main site with people understanding what it actually means, but contact details where staff are employed at additional sites. And similarly for the veterinary health plan, the major plan, obviously just at the primary site, but protocols drawn out of that plan would be useful to have at additional sites where those are relevant, just so it really is a living and breathing document. Okay, so just another sort of question of understanding. So a non-conformance has been identified against HFD. It's a hot day and the ventilation in an old Trowbridge building is inadequate. Well, really the opening at the back isn't open. The isn't open, which is a fail for Red Tractor, a non-conformance, but not a key standard. So is it a major or minor non-conformance by Morrisons, given what we've sort of gone through on our guidance? And how long does the producer have to submit evidence that it's being corrected? Okay, so for us, we see this as a major non-conformance. It's about ventilation. It's a hot day. The pigs may be under sort of stress if they haven't got sufficiently ventilated building. And that's something we'd want to sort of see corrected within 28 days, therefore. We're going through then to the actual, each of the details of these bolt-on standards. So the assessing the standards, the aim of the assessment is really to observe staff competency and pig health and welfare, engage in discussion with staff to establish their understanding, obviously, the farm owners themselves as well, and use this insight to assess compliance with our standards and gather as much information as we need to be detailed in the guidance. But remember, there's no requirement to record evidence for every complaint standard. And then to identify risk and the suppliers requiring additional support using our risk matrix, which is at the end of this presentation, and to leave a copy of that with the farmer. So going through the familiar now Red Tractor standards breakdowns, so documents and procedures. So going through the different ones for Morrisons, so DPM1, so M being the Morrison signifier. Is there an up-to-date copy of the supply questionnaire that covers all sites? So an example of what that might look like, for example, is just there. It's called the supply profile. We can get a copy of the questionnaire from the Morrisons portal. We're trying to put all of our documents on our Morrisons farmer portal, so it's easy for farmers to know where to download the information that they need. There's also click-throughs, of course, on all the guidance notes. So this just needs to be held at the primary site. The standards are minor non-conformance. Some examples of non-conformance might be, there isn't obviously a questionnaire available, or the details aren't up to date. Okay, next slide. DPA2. Does the farm plan and any supporting documents include the following requirements? So housing type and dimensions, a number of drinkers and feed spaces in each pen, the maximum number of pigs for every pen, and the location and entry of fire exit points, as well as how they're secured, and is that recorded? Okay, so something a bit like that, for example. So the information can be a farm layout map and supporting documents, which can be held at the primary site, but maximum stocking densities must be known at all sites. Failure to comply is recorded as a minor non-conformance. And examples of non-conformance are obviously no map, or the map and the supporting documents don't include these additional requirements that we've put in for Morrisons. Next slide, DPB. Does the emergency action plan include the woodheads and or marketing groups out of hours numbers, obviously depending on how the pigs are sold? And additionally, this is a new one for this year, a disaster recovery plan, which explains necessary the actions to prevent overcrowding and to manage pig health and welfare in the event that pigs have to be held back. For example, a shortage of carbon dioxide at woodheads. There was the CO2. We hope that will never happen again, but who knows? Or the suspension, indeed, from a Red Tractor scheme. So we need to sort of think through this. So this plan can be held at a primary site, but contact numbers must be available at all sites. And failure to comply is recorded as a major non-conformance here. So some examples of non-conformance are that there's no emergency contact plan available, doesn't include the woodheads out of hours contact numbers or the marketing groups contact numbers. It doesn't include how an interruption in pig flow would be managed, and we haven't got additional numbers, sort of contact numbers at the additional sites. Okay, DPC. Has there been any written or verbal complaints relating to the pig business? And if so, how were they recorded and woodheads informed? So the complaints record differs from that of Red Tractor, as verbal complaints about the health and welfare of pigs must be recorded and action taken. So woodheads or marketing groups must be informed immediately of any issues and prosecutions that obviously could impact on a reputational basis. So the complaints record can be held at the primary site, and failure to comply is recorded as a major non-conformance. So examples, relevant complaints haven't been documented, or woodheads haven't been informed of any complaints or prosecutions that could have an impact on Morrisons. I think we all can appreciate why that's an important one. Okay, so just to check the in standard before we move on to the next section, please identify the missing requirements in the farm map and table, and would you raise them as a major or a minor non-conformance? So just have a bit of a look through that there. Okay. So moving through there. Okay, so there we go. And so I think as we have observed, there are the missing requirements from the farm map and table at the number of feed spaces per pen, the location of the fire exit and entry points, the biosecure area location. And would we raise those as a major and minor non-conformance? Well, for this here that we've put that as a minor non-conformance, but still want to sort of manage properly. Okay, so the next section, staff and labour providers. Really the aim is to ensure that all staff and obviously the farm owners are trained and competent for the jobs that they're doing. So SCA, this is a new one that we've put in this year, and we think this is an important sort of element to think our way through in the worlds that we live in. So our reference is checked for all new staff that work, volunteer, and for any placement students. Has anyone started recently? So if so, ask how those references were checked. Is there any supporting references material available from their training? Has there been any recent training? Who's attended it? Where's this evidence sort of kept? And are their staff trained to the Morrisons requirements? Do they know about them? And are they aware that we'll have some slightly different standards? And also, is the MPA safe call number included in employment contracts? Is the site signed up to the MPO safe call service? To ask about the contracts, do they have that insight and that knowledge? And if so, will they also know about this number and where to access it? So the information can be held at the primary site. It is down as a major non-conformance. So the examples of non-conformance that the references aren't checked, or there's no reference material available to support the training that's taken place. Staff haven't been trained, don't know what the Morrisons requirements are, and that the contracts don't include the safe call service details. We just think just building this picture of how the matrix at the end can be built. We think information gathered from this standard when completing the animal matrix at the end could go under the stockmanship section, of course. So SCB. Is staff performance and competency reviewed at least twice a year by the vet and documented on either a training manual or a vet report or the quarterly vet report? We're not as sort of wedded to where that needs to be recorded. It's just the fact that it has been, with training actions identified, and more importantly, have the actions been implemented? So to do this, obviously, we can check through the vet reports or training records for references to the staff reviews. And have any training needs been identified, and has that had that evidence? So the information could be held at the primary site. It's a minor non-conformance, but the non-conformances include obviously examples of that the training hasn't been reviewed or the training needs identified by the vet haven't been addressed, and there isn't any evidence that the training is required. So, for example, when you go around, have you seen any inappropriate handling of stock, which would call into question anything that, may have been trained about? So please, again, consider information gathered from the standard when completing the animal matrix under stockmanship. SEC. Is there a training record for every member of staff, which includes training for the Morrisons bolt-on standard, following vet reviews, or for health and safety, which can be a signed policy signed by staff? The training and competence can include that the vet sign off in the health plan. However, there must be an additional record for everyone that works on the site and recorded in any ongoing training. Okay, so the information can be held at the primary site. It's down under a minor non-conformance, but please note this standard is about more having a record of the training rather than the absence of training. It's training for health and safety hasn't taken place. It's got to be raised as SAM1, which we'll come to in a moment. So to check the understanding here, assume the extract from the veterinary health plan includes names and consider if it's adequate for the Morrisons training record requirements, and if not, why? So, give me the answer before I give you the question there. But looking at the veterinary health plan there, so it's not adequate on its own is basically the summary here. It can form part of the record and the vet twice yearly review, as well as a means of confirming a new member of staff is competent for different tasks. But it doesn't really allow for additional and ongoing training to be recorded or evidence of, any of the additional stuff that that Morrisons want. So you probably just want to see something that was slightly more expanded than that. Right, the next section is just peculiar or unique, should we say, to Morrisons. It's all social accountability. So health, safety and welfare of our staff is really important to us, no matter where we all work. And so our social accountability standard was introduced at the beginning of this sort of bolt-on scheme. So SA1, what we've tried to do here is to try and give a bit more detail behind the health and safety and really sort of try and think through why we're doing this. Why is there a reason behind it all? It's not just a box ticking exercise. So yeah, we do want to know if there's a health and safety policy that includes relevant information and evidence that the staff know about it, including a bit of a risk assessment. But the most important thing is really for us, thinking about who's responsible for health and safety and having emergency contact details and the location of the first aid kit, But as we can sort of see from the actual standard itself, it's about having that risk assessment that considers potential hazards as a minimum. So, the safe handling of stock. We know that so many injuries are caused by poor handling or by sort of stock problems, which can cause wounds and crush injuries. So just really conscious of making sure that we're thinking through that in terms of health and safety. Similarly, the safe use of veterinary medicines, including vaccinations, but also in terms of health and safety, what to do in the event of self-injection or potential infection from dirty needle. Do we know about that? Do staff know about it? Controls for zoonosis, so risk of disease transferred between people and pigs is obviously minimised. And safe working and management of slurry storage, another real sort of problem area to avoid any risks, including the inhalation of toxic gases. So good to identify who's responsible for health and safety, check those emergency contact details are displayed, and their first aid kit is available and that where its location is known as well. So the health and safety policy can be held at the primary site, but the emergency contact details and first aid kits must be available at any other additional site. We just never, unfortunately, know where accidents are going to happen. So the absence of policy and training are major, and the failure to display any emergency contact details and have a first aid kit must be raised as a minor non-conformance. Okay. So just some examples of sort of a couple of health and safety policies. You can get these from the Health and Safety Executive or NFU Mutual, for example. And further information about health and safety pig keepers is also on HDB's website. And the details are in the Where to Find Help section at the end of the social accountability bit that we've included for Morrisons. And I think we've sort of gone through this really, but, we sort of know of these sort of stats that, unfortunately there are accidents and deaths happening every year. And we just want to all be able to work together to make sure that we can sort of bring this down. I mean, the number of fatalities in agriculture comes second only to the construction industry. Health and Safety Executive reported 38 workers were killed in construction in 2017 to 2018 and 29 in agriculture, which is just a really upsetting sort of statistic. So the risks need to be mitigated as much as possible. And so good to be able to work together on this. Okay, so SAM11, where staff are employed, is there a first aider available during working hours? Okay, so we're just talking about this in terms of, just note those where staff is employed. We recognise that sometimes there are sort of one-person operations, but please record this as a recommendation. And for the producer that employs staff, explain that by 2020 it will be a requirement to have a qualified first aider available for that site. And please note, in farms where the sole trader, the farmer just needs to have a method of contacting help, or for people to know where they are, just to help keep them safe. SAM2, is the Ethical Trading Initiative base code displayed at the primary site, and are the contact details at other sites when staff are employed? Who's responsible for compliance with this code? So the Ethical Trading Initiative base code is a list of 9 ethical trading principles, which include payment of a living wage, hygienic working environments and facilities, working hours that are not excessive, and no harsh or inhumane treatment or discrimination. So we need the posters, a really good poster. It's well put together, to be displayed at the primary site, visible to all workers, and the contact details at other sites. So examples of non-conformance, obviously, that those are not the case. And we've listed all the non-conformances through the training too, through the documents as well. So to check understanding, health and safety policy is not available. Is this a major or a minor? And identify the missing requirements from the following risk assessments. Okay. Here's a bit of an example of a risk assessment here. Okay, I had a bit of a look through that. So just the health and safety isn't available. Well, that's a major non-conformance. I mean, I think you'll probably have noticed that the risk assessment didn't include anything about the safe handling of pigs or zoonosis controls. And additional sites obviously need that contact detail. And we've put the phone number throughout the training materials just to hopefully make things as easy to access as possible. It's not supposed to be about a tripping up exercise. It's all supposed to be about helping each other and working together. Right, going through to housing, shelter and handling facilities. So this is obviously ensuring the environment that the pigs are kept in is meeting their needs, and also that the unit's secure and managed to avoid any unwanted visitors. So this first standard is an HFM 1 to Morrisons 1. Have the actions appropriate to the unit and its location been taken to limit unauthorised visitors? Is there a no authorised entry sign? Now, I know signs don't do everything, but as we all know, there has been an increasing number of intrusions and pig units targeted by unwanted visitors. So pig welfare is clearly of paramount importance. There's no excuse for poor management. However, site security must be a priority as well to maintain the biosecurity of the herd, as well as to mitigate some of the risk. So discuss that site security with the producer and possible risk of unauthorised access. And, what does the producer believe the level of risk is, and how is it being managed? And has there ever been any suspected incursions? I mean, as a minimum, a review of security should have taken place at all the sites, and it doesn't need to be written, but a no authorised entry sign should be displayed at all times. And that is the major non-conformance. But please consider this sort of information under the tidiness, hygiene and biosecurity aspect. There's lots of discussion too about, how we could think about that security being managed better. A lot of producers now putting in security cameras and CCTV, which is actually just really useful for many other things, like when deliveries arrive and various other things too. So it's good to take the opportunity just to talk through that. HFB will go through to here. So is the temperature and ventilation such that pigs are comfortable? So for us, what we're thinking about here is observe the pigs are they huddled together? Are they showing any signs of heat stress? What's the humidity and the air quality like in the building? For us, this site is much more about observation, and questioning and having that discussion. How is that temperature and ventilation controlled to manage thermal comfort and air quality in weather extremes? So obviously some examples of non-conformance that the pigs aren't comfortable, that they're drafts, or it's too hot or too cold and the air quality isn't suitable. So this could be information gathered under here, could go into the animal matrix, obviously into the housing label. HFD, so how often are the pigs checked for cleanliness, including weather extremes, and are they clean? I mean, we know that pigs like to be clean, and a dirty environment prohibits them from carrying out their normal maintenance behaviour. Preference, as we know, is to lie in dry, clean areas and to soil away from their bed. But we don't want to avoid skin irritation and ectoparasites, flies, all of which are a source of disease transmission and obviously can be more prevalent in dirty conditions. We appreciate that pigs are reared outdoors and soiled in mud's normal, especially in the summer heat when they wallow to control their temperature. And again, as well, in sort of like hot weather, sometimes it's wise to create a wet environment for pigs indoors to cool themselves. It's more a question of just saying, well, actually, if there are any dirty pigs as a result, then what's going to be happening to them? Are they going to be cleaned? What's the biosecurity risk? So it's really having this as a discussion with the farmer. We've included here just the Assure Well guide. I think you'll probably all be very familiar with this, but we are thinking that the failure just to really manage that cleanliness of the pig, relating to their health and welfare, is being the non-conformance, that they're unacceptably and unreasonably dirty, and that would be something would go under welfare. So HFE, is lighting sufficient to read a newsprint? So lighting is something that we all think about obviously a lot with our pigs. We need to think about the daylight hours with a break from natural lighting. A report compiled by Nina Taylor, or Dr. Nina Taylor, on behalf of HTB, describes the pig as an animal that requires light to discriminate between each other and select food containers. In addition, as we all know, pigs are really social creatures and require some form of communication and cues to understand the hierarchy of the group, and some of those are visual communications. There's evidence that very bright light can increase aggression and tail biting. I appreciate there's lots and lots of work and research still to be done on lighting and light levels. Obviously, there are reports on HDB's websites and various other places too. But we're thinking about this being a major non-conformance, and that's really the examples of that. Are those pigs in darkness during daylight hours, or are they equally in permanent light? So please consider the information gathered here under the housing standards of the matrix, and just again have that discussion with the farmer. So HFI.1 is the next sort of piece that we're going to go through. Are the sows regularly checked during the farrowing period to ensure the comfort of the sow and the litter? And is the accommodation clean, as it certainly is in that picture, and well managed? So the what we're looking for here is there any sort of signs of distress or discomfort for the sows? Are the crates long enough, importantly, for them to be in comfortably? Should they be using any crates? And obviously, we want to avoid any sign of lesions caused by uncomfortable farrowing accommodation. We also recommend that a veterinary health plan can be talking through, how often should those sows be being checked, and it's important to sort of have that discussion with the people who are in charge of that part of the site. And again, consider that information against housing. We've put this under the housing section. So HFI.3. Are the sows comfortable? This is following through this piece really in the farrowing crates pre-farrowing. So we've talked a little bit here about nesting materials, and appreciate there's again research that needs to be done here to think about practicalities, but we know that nesting is a natural maternal behaviour in farrowing sows and important for their well-being. So we are sort of trying to think about this in terms of a major non-conformance, just because we're wanting to make sure that the sows are free to express their natural behaviour. So when it's practical to provide them, we need to provide those nesting materials, and they need to be adequate, sufficient quantity or accessible to the sow. And we've put this under the enrichment particular piece of standard, because obviously it's an enrichment material. So just as a checking of understanding for a couple of slides before we're going through to feed and water. So for example, is the shredded paper and the photo on the right prove adequate for nesting material? And does the gate on the left prove adequate? Is that okay in terms of entry points? So as we've sort of say, the sow behind it prevents her being able to nest, so that would suggest that isn't adequate, and the gate on the left doesn't have a no entry sign on it either, so we probably get that through there. Now, the finishing house has solid floor pens, and at entry you can see the pigs are score 2 on the Assure Well manure on the body scale. So is this a non-conformance on a hot day? In the farrowing house, several sows are suckling their litter and have their heads on the feed trough. So what would you check? Under what circumstances would a non-conformance be raised? So going through as an illustration there. So going through, unless the pigs have been showered to keep them cool. If this is Assure Well 2 on a hot day, this is something that we need to be questioning. And the crate's long enough for the sow, and any facial shoulder sores is what we're checking. And raising a non-conformance if the crate's obviously too short or small and the sows are in any discomfort. Right, Moving through to feed and water, obviously aiming to ensure the nutritional needs of pigs are being met. So FWA, are the pigs in a satisfactory condition? And if not, is this being managed? So we're really sort of thinking here about the need for sort of nutrition, and we appreciate that obviously feed conversion rates and nutrition is very important to growing our end pig as well. But we need to sort of think what's acceptable within the sort of like breed parameters for that farm. So are they in a satisfactory condition, or is there any that are over fat or over thin? And if so, is there then evidence of any additional nutritionists' involvement to help that? So relating to welfare and health, this is a major non-conformance, and again, as we sort of popped in there, it's against health management. But we do need to understand that some breeds are genetically leaner, and if relevant, has the farmer explained and understood this? But it's just really talking through the need for feed, but the need to understand when's the most important time to employ the services of a nutritionist. FWI, so if necessary, does the veterinary health plan include a review of in-feed medication, which includes the necessary steps to move away from routine use or prevent routine use? Obviously, for Morrisons, we have a standard that by 2020, we will not be having a routine management use of any antibiotics on farm. This is something obviously that's backed up hugely by rumour, and there's ever increasing concerns about antimicrobial resistance. And it's all about, as we know, managing health to minimise the need to use any of these antimicrobials unless absolutely necessary. So the review can form part of the antibiotic reduction plan required in AHA, but it must consider how to prevent routine use of in-feed medication by using other health management tools, which could include biosecurity or environmental management, sometimes autogenous vaccines where applicable, stocking densities may be something, obviously part of the discussion that the farmer will be having with their vet. So the review document needs to be at the primary site. It is major, and this is under health management. Okay, so next sort of piece, FWK, are feed hoppers for indoor and outdoor use covered where accessible by birds? So we've only put this in, obviously where it's accessible. They don't always need to be covered. It's just depending on the risk again. So this is any non-conformance must be raised as major because of the potential transmission of disease, obviously. So a bit of a checking understanding on this section before we move to animal health and welfare. Pigs are kept in a straw yard in a building with space boarding, so like Yorkshire boarding. Does the feeder need to be covered? Well, we would suggest next question first. In-feed medication has been used for the last 3 batches of an all-in, all-out system, which takes pigs from 7 to 30 kilos. So what information would you expect to see in the veterinary health plan? So moving through to these. So yes, for the first question. So yeah, the feed would need to be covered because obviously if the birds can then get in those spaces, and the feed, a review of the medication use and actions required are followed is something that we'd expect to see as part of that in-feed medication reduction. Okay, so animal health and welfare. So as we know, a good level of animal health management is practiced, supported by the vet, and the responsible use of antibiotics as a result of proactive health management is something, which is in the top of the pile there. AHA, does the veterinary health plan and quarterly vet updates include a list of permitted medicines and clear identification of CIAs, so there's critically important antibiotics, an action plan for the reduction of routine antibiotic use where rumour targets or lower veterinary targets in some cases are not met, and a procedure for reducing the reliance of in-feed medication towards that 2020 date, forming part of the reduction plan, as well as inspection intervals for different classifications of stock, so farrowing or finishing, and a procedure for managing withdrawal periods. Okay. So any non-conformances here are going to be sort of major. The veterinary health plan is a really key part of the pig site. But again, we're just in terms of evidence, it's the protocols that are important about being followed on the additional sites. And this is the piece that is then going onto the veterinary health plan targets, particularly as we all know, veterinary health plans are already reporting mortality, which at the end of the day is the ultimate welfare indicator. So AHC. So are the health and performance records reviewed and discussed at the quarterly vet visits? Can staff describe any actions resulting from this visit? So we are a couple of examples there of what sort of different performance documents might be seen. So again, we're sort of thinking about this as a primary site, the CIDRs, and to put this under health management in terms of our risk matrix piece. Okay, HD. Is the information from real welfare assessments available, and are the staff aware of the findings? Check, it might be verbal or written feedback. Any non-conformances should be raised for Morrisons, and there's obviously the example there of what the real welfare outcome scoring sheet looks like, and any non-conformances about that the visits haven't taken place, or really that the people don't know the outcomes of what that visit sort of what the assessment showed, and the veterinary recommendations therefore haven't been followed. And we've put that under welfare because it is obviously all centering around welfare. HD2. Are enrichment materials accessible, suitable and used by pigs? And this is very much about reward-based enrichment. So please bear in mind the assessment is a snapshot, and much important to gauge information or check about the vet findings in section 5 of the real welfare outcomes, or talk through with the farmer and the staff about why enrichment's provided and why different types have been chosen. We're thinking about trying to have that reward-based enrichment for pigs, and so there's various different classifications of enrichment types, and indeed we've sort of commissioned or in the, our own research into sort of thinking about ratios of enrichment for pigs as well, which will be coming through, and as soon as we have those, we'll publish those results as well. But any examples of non-conformances that no enrichment, or that it's not adequate in any case, or they're not adequate in terms of the ranges that we've talked about, and we just need to put that under enrichment. We do see sort of the provision of reward-based enrichment that pigs genuinely get a benefit out of as one of the most sort of highest priority areas in terms of our bolt-on standards. So really important part to look through and think about. We've got some enrichment materials available for guidance. Obviously, HDB have done things as well, and as I say, we're doing additional research too. So, and there's a bit more there in terms of the different gradings of A, and there's a bit of a detail of what the real welfare outcomes score talks through too. HE, are the inspected intervals noted in the veterinary health plan followed, and is the MPA end of day poster visible and followed? Now, the end of day poster is just a really useful document, and it has some really sensible advice in it. So we just think it'd be great to see this up at every farm, and the staff really understanding what it's describing and why it needs to be followed. Okay, so that's just a copy of it there, and again, links are available. This is something that we should see at every site, and indeed, more importantly than this, the poster being up, is that obviously its recommendations are being followed, and this is there going under stockmanship. HE1, what's been done to manage unacceptable behavioural issues? Obviously a really big welfare concern if they flag up, and we appreciate that these are so multifactorial, but again we just need to try and think, are we seeing vice? Is it being, please, it would be helpful if we can record the number of pigs that are flank or tail and ear bitten, just as well as can be expected. We're expecting, absolute precision, but just more importantly as well, what's been done to manage the problem. We're really keen to try and work with producers to help manage this, and, think about all the different things that can be done to try and get on top of some of these behavioural issues. And so just really keen to understand more about how we can help. So any non-conformance must be raised for Morrisons. Obviously, we all know what these things look like, and this is something that we need to be thinking about all the different sites of the pigs under welfare. There's various different sort of bits of things that can help. The HDB have got some really useful documentation that which we can have a look at. And again, links are provided. It's just something that we're wanting to be able to take note of as well, as we can imagine. So similarly, again, under animal health and welfare, what's been done to manage? Hopefully there aren't any, but if there are any shoulder sores on sows, any non-conformances again raised for Morrisons, and there's the HDB pork lesion scoring table there. Again, sort of like an animal, a major sort of non-conformance, something to be raised on every site, and something we think about under welfare. AHF, movement boards or paddles available, and were they used if the pigs were seen to be handled during assessments? So if there aren't any present, we would recommend a non-conformance here for the pigs to be taken out of the assessment if they need to be. Raise a non-conformance if they're being handled incorrectly. Obviously, don't be moving pigs where they don't need to be. But we want to consider information under here as under the stockmanship guide, and obviously really important to say where pigs are being observed, being moved, that they're being handled and moved appropriately. HG, so have the staff been trained in the Morrisons requirements relating to their role? It's an example of something that could look like there. For example, it might be something that we want to document how much experience people have and, what sort of type of training they've gone through. And again, we want to sort of put this under stockmanship because, hopefully training and experience equals good stock care on our farms. HG, we'd also just like to record the name of the person responsible for animal welfare on that farm. HH, are the last 12 months of quarterly vet visits and welfare outcomes assessments available? Can people sort of identify where they are and record under HC if necessary actions have not taken place? Okay. HI, sick or injured pigs must receive prompt attention. I think the word prompt is really important here, prompt being as soon as they are aware of those pigs needing attention. And red tractor non-conformances must be raised for Morrisons here. Obviously, we're wanting to make sure that, we're all managing our pigs proactively and that, we are sort of getting on top of any major non-conformances here under the welfare banner of Matrix. So just to check our understanding on this section before we move on again. Which standards must be raised for Morrisons if they're not compliant with the red tractor scheme? So we've got HD, HE, E12, HI. Okay, so those are the ones that are red tractor standards, but we should be raised for Morrisons at if they have any non-conformances. And identify the information that was recorded for Morrisons this section. So running through there, the name of the person responsible for animal welfare. Okay. Just thought it'd be useful to sort of go a little bit through this whole enrichment piece. I mean, we talk about suboptimal, moving to optimal enrichment as we progress through time. We may know this already, but just to have a quick run through, optimal enrichment, edible or feed-like. Pigs can eat or smell it. It's chewable. They have information on taste and odour, investigable and manipulable or deformable. So, something that the pig can gain some reward out of interacting with and has some sort of sustainable interest to encourage that exploratory behaviour allow them to express one of their natural behaviours, and it's accessible. More importantly, it's at heights that the pigs can actually reach, and obviously clean and hygienic as well as being in sufficient quantity. But it's all about satisfying the range of the natural behaviours of that pig. Okay, so just to go through here. So which of the following are optimal, suboptimal or marginal for growers and finishers? So just bring these pictures this up there. So we've got straw, wood, all the way down to root veg, wellies, shavings, all the different things that I know we'll have seen as we go around pig housing. So just filled in here. Okay, so just going through. So things like plastic pipe, which reducer used, is fine, but is just marginal. So good to accompany with other things that the pigs can have a longer, more sustained interest in. And again, some pictures there of optimal enrichment and suboptimal and marginal here. So optimal straw, they obviously need to add it once it's all gone. Suboptimal shavings don't supply all the needs because they're not edible, but obviously do provide a lot of investigations needs for pigs. But marginal, if they're not edible or feed-like, and the pigs can't root round in them. So in picture on the left, perhaps the enrichment might be a little bit too high and not chewable at that angle and size, but obviously a picture on the right, they're gaining some sort of interaction with that plastic piping, but it's obviously not sort of edible or really sort of manipulable. So just as a last piece here, the veterinary health plan states all pigs inspected at least once a day, except sows and litters, which are checked twice a day, and farrowing sows, which must be checked as required. In hot conditions, all classes of stock must be checked at least twice a day. So obviously, we just need to check that that's happening. And if it's a non-conformance, and if so, against which standard. So yes, it is a non-conformance if it's not happening. And obviously, that's standard AHE. Right, and this is just pieces looking through which non-conformance would be raised for, so, under AHDs or AHHs. Okay, so looking through now onto biosecurity, we haven't got a lot of additional requirements under biosecurity. But one of the things that we're sort of thinking about is your general impression of the farm as we're going round. So we need to think about under the tidiness, hygiene and biosecurity, it's your observations of the site. However, just an additional bit that we've put in is just the importance of hand washing facilities available for staff entering and leaving all the different sites that they're on, and we sort of see this as being in all sites, and so we just sort of obviously need to sort of have soap available and water. I mean, it can be in a bucket, but somewhere to be able to access some soap and water and to get clean to prevent any zoonosis or transfer of disease. Okay, so alcohol hand wash on its own isn't really sufficient. Right, moving through then, animal medicines and husbandry. So embrace as little as possible, as much as necessary approach to antibiotic stewardship, and noting that use needs to be considered alongside general animal health and welfare, as I'm sure we all appreciate. Okay, so we're just going to go into a little bit further detail here about our antibiotic use in the pork supply chain that we've got, particularly as Morrisons. We know the sort of challenge of antimicrobial resistance. So one of the things that we're thinking about is the farm business achieving the rumour targets or lower targets set by the vet? And if not, is there an antibiotic reduction plan documented in the veterinary health plan? We do appreciate the ROMA targets have been set for the whole pig industry, and therefore, individual sort of businesses is more difficult to assess. However, the veterinary targets for the site and the business are really important. We all do need to work together looking at antibiotic reductions, and we do recognise that antibiotics may be used differently at each stage of a pig's life. However, we're firmly wedded to those sort of targets for the industry, and we want to make sure that we're all helping suppliers to achieve those. So those are the antibiotic reduction targets that have been set as milligrams per PCU by rumour. I'm sure we're all familiar with going down to 99 milligrams per PCU by 2020. So plan on the primary site, protocols on all sites and under health management. So we talked about the site use of CIA, so critically important antibiotic milligrams per PCU. So this is where we want to record if targets are met or if they're not yet, not the amount used. Don't raise this as non-conformance, but it's something that's being managed separately through our red tag program, but something that we just need to sort of help our producers work on and think about. So for example, what's the CIA used? It might be 0.02 milligrams per PCU. So yeah, are the rumour targets met for antibiotic use with these and obviously any other antibiotics? Yes or no? Into the medicine section here. Okay, various different antibiotic reduction plan documents, in PA and Pig Veterinary Society, rumour. So lots and lots of conversations going on about this, and we want to play our parts in helping influence the reduction of antibiotic use on farm. As part of this initiative, we've got something which we've called the sort of red tag system at Morrisons, which we're sort of talking this through, and it's under AMG. So we've talked about this as is the documented process for identifying treated pigs followed, and is our red tag system for CIAs followed and the declaration sent in as necessary. Now this is a major non-conformance because something that's major to Morrisons policy, and examples of non-conformance is obviously about the identification of pigs under the withdrawal period is not followed. It's not clear how treated pigs can be differentiated when more than one pig has been treated in a pen on different days, or the CIA red tag system is not displayed or understood by staff, or it's not clear which pig was treated and will require a red tag for slaughter, and we need this under the medicines matrix. Just thinking about the CIA policy, I mean, it's obviously still possible to use CIAs in veterinary prescription and in line with the Red Tractor scheme requirements. And we certainly are not asking for anything to be done which challenges animal health and welfare in any way, if there's no viable alternative. But all we're asking producers to do is, should their animals have been treated with a CIA before they're being sent to Woodheads, we need them to be tagged with a red tag and complete the declaration form identifying the pig when consigning them to Morrisons. These forms can be sent via email or hard copy with the haulier, and the red tag pins obviously need to be penned separately on transport, so we can just handle them differently when they come to the abattoir. Obviously a little picture of a red tag there, and the Morrison CIA letter for your information, and declaration form as well. Okay, so AMH is the broken needle policy visible, evidence of training and records. Obviously, important part of the food chain standards. Policy can be in the veterinary health plan, associated protocols, or as long as it's known by all staff and or displayed. It's much more important that it's displayed on all sites. And and the examples of non-control would just be, nobody knows about that policy, there's no record of the training, or policy is not available to staff. Okay, so under animal medicines, before moving to the next section, which of the standards are following non-conformances raised against? Okay, and so we've got those there as the different standards. So Mrs. Brown sells all her pigs to Morrisons. She explains that, she has used Marbasil on a litter of pigs in the farrowing house. What does she need to do to satisfy the Morrisons protocol? So obviously ensure the pigs are identifiable throughout their lives, so they can be red tagged if going to Woodheads. Inform Woodheads as part of the booking in process. Complete the CIA declaration letter and separate the stock on the vehicle. Okay, just moving now into the last couple of sections. So fallen stock is all about really maintaining the MPA end of day requirements and ensuring respect for livestock's been maintained even after death. It's a really important part of our general principles of stock keeping. So any non-conformances must be raised for Morrisons here. So at the end of the day, poster followed on FSA, major if not adhering to the procedure. Under stockmanship, I mean, it's just really important as well, obviously, that pigs are being put as soon as they're, sort of dead, into dead pig bins that are secured and locked, and that is really, really important. And we need to be able to respect the fact that we want to put pigs away and that they're sort of out of the way of other pigs as well. Okay, so livestock transport as the final piece of the standard. We're getting there now. So ensure the Woodheads are involved in any delays. So the drivers carry emergency contact numbers for Woodheads, and our Woodheads notice if they're going to be disruptions to a short journey, that means the 8 hours will be exceeded. So that's something to sort of work with your hauliers on. We just wanted now, we've talked about this matrix quite a lot, but it's all about managing risk but also celebrating excellence for the benefit of producer and for Morrisons. And so it's very much at the heart of the assessment process and the module. So we want you to complete the matrix for each of the criteria and, importantly, in discussion with the farmer. So we'd recommend the reports completed once the non-conformances have been explained to the farmer and the report signed, and you'll find the best way that works for you. But we think a good way of completing the reports in discussion with the producer by asking where, and based on the assessment findings, the producer would place themselves today. So good to take a moment to review the content of the table, examples later on, which will guide to this red, amber, green or RAG scoring approach. And as we've said earlier on, a copy should be left on the farm at the end of the farm assessment. So with your help, the risk matrix helps us understand the excellence, but also the risks and challenges in our supply chain. And it's really sort of helping us identify those whether things are being met or not met. So please use the following information to determine where the score should be on this 300 sow breeding to finish unit. So just to show you here. Okay, so if we're going through here, we can sort of see in terms of health management, what's been put down, environmental enrichment, housing standards. Okay, so following those details through, and you can come back and read this through at your leisure later. But, for example, we've sort of shown on the red, amber, green and bold green, which is, excellent, where we would sort of put on the information gathered above the scores here. So, for example, if the units looks really run down, broken entrances, no tidying up, then that would be a cause for, alert, really, a red score. But equally, the pigs might look have a fantastically tidy unit, or the pigs might look really well and really excellent stockmanship goes on. They're all handled with care. So that's under the excellent. We want to call out excellence as well as understand risk. And just a bit more going through the other sections of that slide as well. So just about next, what happens next? So completing the Morrisons assessment report. Evidence is only required when specifically requested. So, number of Talbot and pigs or non-conformances, and reports must be sent to the certification body within the timescales instructed. Okay. And then any sort of failure to present the evidence will be result in Morrisons being made aware, and we'll obviously then chase the producer for the information at that point. Okay, so we've got therefore to the end of our training slide. So we really appreciate your time in listening to this webinar and in working with us. If there's any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch. But otherwise, thank you very much. And